Alright everyone, so this is one of my most requested videos, which is on how do I actually price my automations, because as you've seen, they all have custom pricing and it varies on a lot of different factors. And I'm basically going to explain my process and how I come up with my prices, and then hopefully that serves as some sort of inspiration and guidelines for however you want to do it. So just getting into it, now one thing you need to understand is your pricing is going to exponentially increase with your experience and your expertise. So if you're just starting out, which a lot of you are inside the community that we have, then you should be trying to deliver more value than what it's worth at this current time. When I was starting out, I was building automations and just trying things out for free for my first few clients, just because I wanted to see what works, what doesn't. And I didn't have that confidence to put a price tag associated with it, just because I didn't know if it was 100% going to work. But of course, if you're following my guidelines and my walkthroughs and you're able to test things yourself, then you can have that confidence, which I didn't have. But the point here is just be prepared to deliver more value, go above and beyond, especially in these early stages. Now, generally, my automations are based upon specific criteria and factors that I have, and these are specific to me. These are factors that I look for and that I consider, but they may not be of importance to you, or you might have some other, framework in mind. So bear that in mind. You are flexible and able to come up with whatever you want, but naturally over time, you're going to build your own system anyway. So just instinctively after a conversation with your lead, they give you the requirements. You're going to be very quick at coming up with the prices, and eventually you're going to get to that point. But for now, just follow a simple system and work through that to come up with your proposals. So the factors that I consider are these. So starting with my labor hours. So when I receive a proposal or requirements for a job, I look at how many hours is this going to take me realistically. Now, this has been an approximation, especially for you, because you don't know how long it's going to take. But is this, a 2-hour project? Is it a 10-hour? Is it a 2-week project? And then you have to factor that into your price. So especially if I'm outsourcing this to my team or any specialists, then I have to take their hourly rates into consideration and then use that, bake that into my price. So that's a very important factor. How long is this actually going to take? And then there's investment and cost. So if you're building this out for your client and say it requires a certain tech stack, or you're using Zapier and you might have to upgrade your subscription, or you're getting softwares on their behalf, whatever it is, if you are paying those out of pocket, then that's something you have to consider and bake into your price. If the client is covering that and buying the accounts and all the subscriptions that you need, then that's different. But just be aware of exactly what your expenditures are going to be for this automation, and then bake that into your price. Then we've got the budget. So ideally in the discovery call, when you're speaking with the client, try and have the budget come up as some sort of approximation. If they can give you a specific number, fantastic. If they can, then come up with some sort of range so you know what you're working with. And then that confines you into what you're realistically able to offer. And if you aren't able to be within their budget, then just, let them know that this is not going to work, or come up with a more bare bones alternative that you can get done in their budget. So that's what I would do. Next, we have the complexity. So what I mean by this is, if it's a basic automation, then obviously they're easier to implement. But if they come to you with a very unique, specific use case of using softwares and things that you're not used to or that you've never used before, then you have to bake into the time of the research that you're going to have to conduct. You have to learn a brand new software. You have to learn about how to build a connection to it using their API system. Any sort of research or analysis that has to be done to come up with this system is a factor that you have to consider into baking into the price. If they come to you with the problem that you have no idea how to do, and then you have to just sit there with like a pen and paper or like a flow chart like I do and come up with that solution, then that's time that you have to factor in and you have to bake into your price. The more complex it is, the more you don't know how to do it, the more expensive this is going to be, because you have to value your own time. So that's complexity. Then we have priority and urgency. So this is what gives you leverage in the sense that you are able to charge more if this is like a tier 1, super urgent, high priority problem for the client. You do have leverage there where you can charge a higher price if they need it badly, if they need it quicker, if they need it sooner. If this is priority number 5, something they don't really care about, that's really not going to impact their business, it's not like mission critical, then you're going to have a hard time charging like a high ticket price for it. And they're probably just not going to go forward with the project. So you have to understand what their priority levels are, what's their number one concern, and that's what you have to go after if you're looking to make a lot of money through this. So only tackle the high priority problems. Don't waste your time with low priorities. That's priority. And then the business type. So what I mean by business type is that naturally every business has a different nature to it. They have different operating costs, overhead, different structures on how they make money. And that's something you have to factor in. If you're dealing with a high ticket business like a dental clinic or a surgeon, and they have high margins, they charge a high ticket service, and they have money to throw around, then that's very different to dealing with a restaurant. Restaurants are notoriously known for having lower margins, and in those scenarios you're not able to get away with charging high retainers or high upfront costs or high monthly maintenance fees or whatever it is. So you have to factor in, who am I dealing with, what's their industry like, and realistically, are they going to go for the price that I want? And then perhaps it's something to consider when even choosing your niche. I would recommend going after those higher ticket, higher margin businesses, like even the service providers like painters, electricians, landscapers. They've got fantastic margins. Restaurants are just known for having lower, more painful margins to have to deal with. So please factor that in when you're coming up with your proposals. So that's your business type. And then the maintenance and support required. So this is more on the monthly retainer if you're planning to go that route. How much work is this going to be in terms of upkeep? Is it like a set and forget automation where you build it once, you don't really have to check on it? But if it's something that requires constant optimization and tweaking, like an AI bot, for example, then that's something that you have to consider. How many hours a month or a week is my commitment going to be to making sure that this is running the way that I promised? And if there's any support required as well, is this client someone who's typically going to be reaching out to me on a daily, weekly basis that I have to deal with them? Or are they more independent and, they're not really going to bother me? So that's something to consider as well, and then bake that into your costs. Another one to consider is the future potential in the partnership. So if this is someone that has the potential to provide more business to you in the future, like, so perhaps you're looking to work with one franchise of theirs, but they own like 10 to 15 locations. And they said if this goes well, then they're happy to have a discussion to expand it to the rest of the locations. In that scenario, it makes a lot of sense to discount your price for the sake of getting that longer term business. So don't be afraid to offer discounts or be more flexible in those scenarios, because it just makes sense in the long run. Like, that's just good business. So definitely something to bear in mind. Have a look at the individual you're dealing with. Do they own multiple businesses? Are they well connected? What kind of network do they have? That might not be public information, but if you can bring it up in discovery, then it can be very useful for you to strategically, factor that into your price. So this one's a bit more unique to someone at my level of agency, in the sense that, as you're starting out, you're not going to have this problem. But because of the resources that we have available and the time that me and my team have, we can't always take on new projects, especially like during busier times, when we have a lot going on. Then sometimes we would even have to turn away business or postpone it or give them like a timeline that we'll get back to you in like 3 months or something. So in those scenarios, if there's somebody who has a good fit and a good project, and we have limited space available, then it justifies me to ask for a higher rate to make it worth my time, where I can kind of be more selective on who I'd want to work with. So yeah, this is unique to me. You're not really going to have this problem as you're starting out, but eventually down the line, you do have to factor in your resources. Obviously, you can expand your team and build up that way, which is what I intend to do. But naturally, this is something that is going to come up, so something to consider. Now, based on these, I come up with a price that makes sense for me. I factor all of these into a proposal, and then I send it out to the client. And I basically come up with a project that makes it worthwhile for me. It makes sense. What I'm getting out of this is enough to justify going into the project, and something that is reasonable that I think they will accept as well. So it's a balancing act between both lines. And over time, you're just going to get better at working that out. But this is the framework that I use. Obviously, you don't have to use all of it. You don't have to follow it in this same structure. Make it your own. See what makes sense for you. I think as you're starting out, please be flexible. Don't try and demand the world, if you want to start making crazy money. I think prove yourself first, get your testimonials, and then you can start justifying your price later on. But I hope this was useful. A lot of people give me messages about how do I price my automations. So this is the thought process behind it. All right, take care.